Well, welcome everybody. We're just really glad that folks are able to be here and to think about the next version of the maps. Now, we all knew that it was very likely that the court would send them back to work, but the longer it took, especially for the state legislative maps, I started to get super duper anxious. But first we heard about the state legislative maps, and then we heard about the congressional, and I just really want to welcome you. So if you'll move to the next slide, we'll have an overview, and then I'm going to hand it off to Brandy Slaughter. So welcome everyone. I'm just really glad that we're here today to talk about what we should be doing this week and how we should be planning also for the congressional map making. We're going to start with a few words from Reverend Brandy Slaughter. We're going to do some updates and talk about, well, what happened last week. Then some of this you're going to be really familiar with. It's like, well, how do you think about doing testimony? What are the things that we should be thinking about because things are a little different this time? Then we're going to talk a little bit about including community information and a little bit about the content. And then I know you all have a ton of questions or ideas and suggestions. I have a feeling that Brian Glassman, who I see right now as I look out, it's a little like Romper Room, and I see Rita Kipp, but I'm sure that there are folks that are real experts here that have really been looking at these maps in some detail, that I would encourage you all to throw in your ideas into the chat and your questions into the chat, and I'm hoping this is a really good conversation. And with that, Brandy Slaughter, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. Good evening, everyone. Gosh, thank you for this opportunity to be before you again. I spent yesterday reflecting at the foot of Dr. King at the King Monument in Washington, D.C. and excerpted from the words excerpted from the I Have a Dream speech are words that are etched into the monument, and it's the overall theme for the design. And the words are, out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. Now, when I left Ohio for Maryland, we had rigged maps. We had maps that were gerrymandered, that diluted the votes of Black and Brown people. Maps that were created for no other reason than partisan advantage. And there is good news from heaven. There is good news from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King that out of a mountain of despair, there is a stone of hope. When I read the news that not only were the state maps rejected, but also the congressional maps, I rejoiced. We truly have a stone of hope. Now, while the King family walked today to urge the passage of voting rights legislation, I marched from the Supreme Court to the Capitol building, to the Hart building, which is the Senate building, and ultimately to the White House to urge the abolition of the death penalty. And both of these issues are issues that Reverend King felt strongly about, and both necessary to esteem people's value and their human dignity. Out of despair, there is a stone of hope. And as I reflected about, the work of the voting rights, what good is it to make sure that everyone has access to the ballot box if we're voting in elections where the elected officials don't represent our interests? They're racially gerrymandered maps, politically gerrymandered maps that suppress the power in our votes and lead to voter apathy. The Freedom to Vote Act would improve transparency by requiring redistricting meetings be open to the public. Yes, we're all for that. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act would restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and provide essential protections against racial gerrymander. And we are excited for that. But let me be clear. One of the most impactful things that you can be doing to protect our democracy and honor the life and legacy of Dr. King is to continue to fight for fair maps. Another Martin Luther said, everything that is done in this world is done by hope. And we have a stone of hope. We have a renewed hope. We have hope that springs eternal, a hope and a future. a hope to get us through the darkest of times, a hope to re-energize and refit us to the task at hand. Reverend King once said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. I pray that you receive the hope that the court rulings present. Trust me, I had despair. I remember we sat in all those hearings and it's like, I testified. Did they hear what I had to say? This is not the process that when we voted for these reforms, we thought we would get. I had the eye rolls. Here they go again, just thirsty for power. But allow this stone of hope to transmute any of the thoughts of despair that you might have had as fuel for the fight. Thank you again for allowing me into this space, into this community, a community that I know will not rest until the maps are fair and until the legislature delivers on the expectations of the people. We have a stone of hope. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Brandy. All right, well, why don't we move to the next slide and we'll get started talking. So I'm actually going to hand this over to my friend Colin Marazzi to tell us a little bit about what happened with the two lawsuits. And thank you, Colin.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Brandy. I think that was a very important note you made to just ground where we are today. And with it being Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I think that's especially pertinent to the work that we're all doing here. But yes, so I wanted to give a brief rundown on how both redistricting lawsuits shook out. I will keep it brief. I'm sure everybody here has read the litany of news stories and press statements resulting from the decisions. So I'll just give the cliff notes. So for our first redistricting lawsuit challenging the state House and state Senate maps, we made the assertion, the ACLU, the League of Women Voters, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and our lawsuit, we asserted that the enacted map was a blatant violation of the proportional representation and political fairness requirements included in Article 11, Section 6. We made that assertion and we backed it up with evidence from nationally renowned redistricting experts. Most notably was by the work of Dr. Kasuki Amai. And I say most notably because his expert analysis and report was most frequently and most compellingly cited by the majority of justices when crafting their opinion. And Dr. Amai's expert report illustrated in very clear terms that the enacted General Assembly district maps, both the House and Senate maps, were statistically gross outliers in terms of their partisanship and their skew towards overrepresenting Republicans in the state legislature. How was his evidence so conclusive? Well, Dr. Amai is a nationally renowned expert in crafting computer algorithms and computer algorithms dealing with electoral and redistricting systems specifically. So he crafted a computer algorithm that included all of the redistricting mechanical requirements that are included in sections 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, the neutral redistricting criteria, as some would call it. And he produced 5,000 sample maps using that criteria. And of those 5,000 sample maps that his algorithm created, none produced as heavily a skewed partisan outcome as what was adopted by the Redistricting Commission. The Supreme Court found this exceptionally informative and a really strong indication as to what the intent of the Redistricting Commission, and in particular the Republican legislative leaders of the commission, what their intent was with adopting this map. So what did the Supreme Court say? Essentially, they said that the Redistricting Commission has 10 days from when the order was given or when the order was issued. They have 10 days to go back to the drawing board and come up with a map that closely corresponds, and this is important, closely corresponds to 54% to 46%. Those percentages of Ohio's partisan vote share were explicitly stated in the order that any compliant map has to closely correspond with that, with those percentages. Now, if I may opine for a second, and Dr. Glassman, he and I actually spoke on the phone earlier today about this, so I think our conversation illuminated this point to me, is that they identified 54% to 46% as the benchmark. We should be saying, and we'll get into this when we talk about testimony, that that is the end goal. That is where we start, and that is where we should end. The only reason that we should deviate at all from those explicit percentages is if there are constructional restraints, meaning you can't comply with the mechanical drawing construction requirements and still meet those percentages. Now, I'm not a cartographer. I haven't done the analysis, but I believe it's a reasonable ask to hit those percentages on the head. And that is what we should be asking when or if we have the opportunity to go in front of the Redistricting Commission. So the commission has explicit instructions. They have to meet these benchmarks, and they have until Monday, January 24th at midnight to get this done. And I just want to note that that is Monday at midnight going into Tuesday. So they'll have all day Monday to adopt a plan as well. Again, that's Monday, January 24th. And also what is a very nice cherry on top for us is that the Supreme Court explicitly stated that they are retaining their judicial review, their ability to go back on any subsequently adopted maps and perform this same analysis to ensure that any subsequent maps are compliant with Ohio's Constitution. And if if groups, individuals believe that the soon to be enacted new map does not meet the requirements as laid forth by the Supreme Court, we are able to challenge the adopted map again within 3 days of that final adoption deadline. So once a map is adopted, we'll have 3 days to file any sort of challenge to it. So those are the cliff notes for the state legislative lawsuit and subsequent instructions by the court. Switching now to the congressional lawsuit, which is a little different because in Article 19, which is the governing article on congressional redistricting in the state, there is no, it does not have a proportional representation requirement like Article 11 does, which governs General Assembly districts. Instead, the focus in congressional redistricting is on keeping communities, municipalities, and townships whole without going through the litany of prescribed steps for meeting these requirements. It's essentially out of Ohio's 88 counties, 18 counties may be split once, and I want to say 5 may be split up to twice. And as we've seen, and as we did see, the General Assembly took advantage of the allowable splits in Article 19 when developing their map. And as such, and as a result of using discretionary splits, non-mandatory splits, the General Assembly passed on a party line vote a plan that would afford Republican congressional candidates, roughly 12 to 13 seats out of Ohio's 15-seat congressional delegation. Obviously, this is a absurd outcome, given that Ohioans vote, again, typically 54% to 46% Republican to Democrat. So we went through and offered, again, really the same sort of expert analysis. We had Dr. Kasuki Amai perform another algorithm, another assessment of plausible maps given the neutral redistricting criteria. And just like in the General Assembly case, his analysis, his algorithm found that the enacted General Assembly or the enacted congressional map was a statistical outlier, meaning that I want to say less than 1% of the 5,000 sample maps that Dr. Amai's algorithm produced created as skewed a outcome as the adopted map. Again, the majority of the court held that this demonstrated intent and that it demonstrated an intent to unduly favor the Republican Party while also unduly disfavoring the Democratic Party. The Supreme Court also highlighted 4 specific counties: Hamilton, Franklin, Cuyahoga, and Summit counties as instances where the General Assembly violated another portion of our congressional redistricting criteria, which is not unduly splitting governmental units. If you'll remember back, excuse me, Hamilton County and Franklin County were both split twice, meaning that portions of 3 different congressional districts made up those counties. Now, in Hamilton County, that has resulted in a county that voted 58% for President Joe Biden being represented by 3 Republican congressmen. And in turn, in Cuyahoga County, that resulted in a county that votes nearly 70% for Democratic presidential candidates to have only 1 of 3 congressional representatives from the Democratic Party. They also outlined in Franklin County that the 15th district, which makes up the remaining portion of Franklin County outside of the urban core district, which is District 3, the 15th district, which constitutes the surrounding suburbs and portions of Columbus, is not compact, meaning it is too large and spread out because of the inclusion of Madison, Fayette, Clinton, Pickaway counties in that same district. So they specifically highlighted that as well. And finally, they mentioned Summit County as an undue split because Summit County does not have a high enough population to warrant a split. It has less of a population than a single congressional ratio of representation. So the court said that that was an undue split that cracked Democratic leaning voters, diluting their voting power. We could not agree more with the Supreme Court's analysis and with their final decision. So what did they say? They said that the General Assembly has to go back to the drawing board. They have 30 days from when the order was issued to draw a compliant map. And if they do not, then that responsibility then goes to the Ohio Redistricting Commission. So that is where we stand. That is the reasons for the invalidation of these congressional maps. And I'll go ahead and stop there so we can save space at the end for a robust Q&A session. So no, we'll just wait here and we'll go on and we'll save for questions till the end. But thank you.
Well, I know that we had up the hearing that's tomorrow at 10 a.m. for a little while so that you can look at it. This section is really about the kinds of things that you already know. And so Mia, if you'll move forward into the next 2 slides. Many of you have actually already testified. And so as we're going into this very short time period, there are a couple different things that I think that we should be thinking about. One, the court has actually given them a direction and been very clear about the standards. And by that, I mean what exactly representational fairness is. And so when we're thinking about the testimony, highlighting that we, follow the court's order, and you want to be thinking about the fact that, for example, they had, let's say, not a press release yesterday, 2 reporters. So we don't know about this hearing because it was put on the Ohio Redistricting Commission's website. If you go there, you can't get any basic information. Anyone who's tried to submit testimony in advance, because that's the way they like to do it. We got bounce backs. Any of those Ohio Redistricting Commission emails are no longer working. And so right now, I'm going to encourage you all, if you're dying to send your testimony, you can send it to the Speaker of the House, a guy named Bob Cupp, and you can send it also to Senator Vern Sykes, or just wait a little while. I do think it's really important for us to be thinking about that written testimony, because the time is really short, and so making sure that they understand really clearly where we're coming from. Also, as you're thinking about written testimony, I know it says here that written testimony can be longer. I think we need to think about kind of the words of Mark Twain, his apology. He said, "I apologize for such a long letter. I just didn't have time to write a short one." And so as you think about when you're doing your testimony, making it short and clear, simply because they're going to be getting a lot of information, it's very important for you to think about like what your story is, and to focus on your own community, and be sure that you have a real focus on, well, what was wrong with the districts? What is it that how do you want to have your community kept together? So Tiffany's going to pop in Trevor Martin's email. Trevor did all of the kind of community mapping with folks. So if you're wanting a little bit of help to think about how do you tell your story, how do you tell your story? I want to show what my community is. Trevor is here to help. And there are, district maps, and there are community maps, and those community maps can help encourage the map makers, because at the end of the day, they manipulate these districts, they divide our communities so that they can have partisan advantage, but really focusing on, hey, don't divide my community. I don't want my vote manipulated. And then, I doubt they're going to let us say anything tomorrow, but it is very important that they get the point. It isn't just the court that's watching them. It's all of us and all voters. And so I highly encourage you to show up tomorrow, wear your swag or your Fair Districts pin. It makes sense to have as many people in that room as possible. Now, I realize COVID is a challenge. And so any of you are like, okay, as many as possible. I encourage us as much as possible to be in line of the camera, so that the camera that goes out on the Ohio channel can see us. And then if the room does get too full, what they'll do is they will set up a side room for folks. And that also makes a real important statement. Now, if you're willing to go to the next slide. So many of these rules, I think the first one we always include just because it is incredibly challenging to be courteous and respectful to all of those folks who so disrespected us. But I encourage you, speak your piece, write your piece. It doesn't make sense to make fun of them too much. Just encouraging them to get back to work. If you're going to a hearing, you really should expect, it's not the kind of thing it can last an hour, or it can last 6. So just be prepared for that. And then, I always encourage, everybody to take a breath if they need to. And that's really important, especially when you've been waiting for hours to go testify, and you get up to that podium and you're just like, woo, all the stuff. And it's hard to be compelling unless we take a breath and we're slowly explaining what's going on. So I noticed people were asking about extra swag. We will bring anything that we have with us. I think Mia has some t-shirts. I have some buttons. So if you have extras of anything, please bring them along with you. Oh, by the way, my yard sign is in disrepair. It was up so long. So I also, it would be wonderful to be able to have a yard sign. So anybody has any extra yard signs, please bring them along. And Mia, if you'll move to the next slide. One of the things that can make a real compelling case, because this isn't just about partisan fairness, this is about keeping our communities together. And I would highly recommend, as you're thinking about your testimony, and whether it's written or it's something you're planning to do verbally, I think it's worth thinking about, hey, I want to keep my community together. We have a local business that we want to, local business. We share the same school districts. You think about all the different, I am so proud of our parks, or whatever it is that makes your community so special. It's important to realize when we send somebody to the State House, or we send somebody to represent us in Washington, they're representing communities, and just bringing it back to that can be really essential. And with that, if you could go to the next slide. I know that for many of us, we've been looking at maps and thinking about maps, and I would highly encourage you to take a look at the different maps. And Mia, this is the part where you can actually go along fairly quickly. These slides are going to be sent to you. I highly encourage you to look at what they created and then highlight how it divided your community and how you would like communities to be kept together. And so these are just a few of them. You will notice we're not doing every single slide. We're not doing every single county, but I want us to be thinking about how is it that they divided us, and letting them know very clearly, we want our communities to be kept together. And as we go to kind of the last ones, here's Franklin. I live right there. I'm actually going to hand it back to Colin again. And this is Colin Marazzi from ACLU, Ohio.
Well, excuse me. Well, thanks, Catherine. And now we want to talk about some things that we think should be lifted up in your testimony, or, whenever you're conversating with or sending a letter or an email to your state rep or state senator. These are some things that we really want to start pushing for as the redistricting committee or commission begins drawing new state legislative maps. And I want to make an important note here that we need to always be mindful when we are preparing testimony, writing testimony, submitting testimony, that we are very clear and consistent about what maps we are discussing, whether they be the General Assembly or congressional maps. It's very important that we mind our P's and Q's and make sure that we are talking about the right maps and using the right language when we're talking about how the Supreme Court said that the General Assembly or the Redistricting Commission needs to draw a compliant map. This will save us a lot of headaches, and people who are testifying, we want to make sure we have the most impactful testimony. So the first thing that everybody should consider is there a map? Are there maps? And the answer is yes, there are, that the Redistricting Commission should use as a model or look to adopt flat out. We have some of those maps on the Ohio Redistricting Commission website from previously being submitted. And we want to highlight the map submitted through the Ohio Redistricting Competition that Fair Districts did, and also the Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission's map that they submitted as well. Those maps should be labeled on the Ohio Redistricting Commission website, so you can find them, download them, and put them into Dave's Redistricting, which I'm sure Trevor has trained so many of us on how to do already. But once we get those uploaded, we can actually take a look at maps and start looking at what we think is most, what would most make a compliant map and make the most sense for your community. Also, we want to frame all of our conversations, all of our testimony, and why is redistricting important to you? Is it because your community has been split apart, has been fractured, and it has created a very difficult environment for neighborhoods and communities to petition their state representative or their state senator or their congressperson? And when we're talking about why it's important, we want to get as specific as we can, whether or not, I can just think, in Franklin County here, one of the proposed congressional maps, for me personally, had me living in one district, working in another, and yet socializing in a third. So those are the kind of things we want to bring up. We want to maintain communities where, you know, we live, work, and play together. And those are the types of districts that allow us to have the best and most responsive form of representation. Now, in the slides that we just, you know, kind of scanned through, again, you will have these slides after tonight's presentation, so you can go in and actually see how they split your communities, and so you can have a better idea of ways to specifically offer to improve them. And also, you know, when we want to make sure that, you know, we are cognizant of demographics when we're looking at districts. We're not, you know, we want to make sure that our Black and brown neighbors, brothers and sisters are getting the same meaningful representation that every other Ohioan deserves to have. And if we are seeing maps that do not do that, we should be calling that out as well. And so we can go to the next slide here. Here is where, while we get the other slide pulled up, we want to talk about making sure that we are being consistent and correct when we're writing our testimony. For example, tomorrow's meeting of the Redistricting Commission is focused solely and exclusively on the state legislative maps. So we don't want to be offering any testimony or writing any testimony on the congressional maps. We want to maintain all of our communications on the state legislative maps for tomorrow's hearing and the subsequent meetings of the Redistricting Commission. Again, we want to make sure that we are projecting our knowledge, our keen sense of where we are right now. And the best way to do that is to have a consistent message that is on the correct map. And it also has an impact on what we're going to include in our testimony. For example, for the state legislative maps, we want to make sure we reiterate that the Supreme Court said that the enacted General Assembly maps violated the proportional representation requirements of Article 11, Section 6, the proportional representation requirements. The court explicitly said a compliant map needs to closely adhere to Ohio's 54 to 46% partisan vote share. That is what we mean when we say proportional representation. And also, we want to talk about how our districts should be kept together and not cracked apart to dilute the voting strength of certain communities. And we also want to make sure that districts are not packed together to waste certain communities' votes in elections. These are very basic talking points. It's really meant to just kind of, guide your testimony for you to build it out with your own personal narrative and personal storytelling. But we want to make sure that we are talking about proportional representation when we're talking about the state legislative maps, and we want to highlight the 54% to 46% partisan vote share. And you can go to the next slide, please. And now when we get to congressional redrawing, this is going to, first of all, be happening in front of the Ohio General Assembly, not the Ohio Redistricting Commission. But we want to talk about, again, we want to make sure that we are citing the correct opinion and order from the Supreme Court when we're doing our testimony on the congressional districts. And the big things to remember for congressional districts is that the Supreme Court held that the map unduly favored the Republican Party, it unduly disfavored the Democratic Party, and it unduly split governmental units in violation of Section 1C3. There is no proportional representation requirement in Article 19, which is dealing with congressional suits or redistricting. So we want to make sure that we are aware of that when we're writing our testimony. We want to talk about unduly favoring one party over another and unduly splitting government units. Now, if we wanted to get, if we go back for just a little bit, two things I wanted to cover. Two specific remedies that the court, hinted at, and also, strongly hinted at. is that when we talk about unduly splitting government units, the court says that Cuyahoga, Franklin, and Hamilton should only be split once. They should not be split twice because that allows for partisan manipulation of our congressional lines. And in order to keep those communities together and to not unduly split units, those 3 counties should only be split once. Now, for Ohio's other large counties that do not have a high enough population to that would require them to be split, so they have less population than a congressional ratio of representation, meaning they have less than about 786,000 people, those counties should not be split at all. And some counties that fall into that category are Butler, Lucas, Montgomery, Summit, and Stark. And one final piece that I think is very interesting and very important that we include. Our opponents in the congressional redistricting case repeatedly tried to tie how much better the enacted map was to the 2011 congressional map and say, look at how many fewer splits there are, and look at how much more compact it is than that district. And it just visually looks better. And the Supreme Court threw all that outside. They threw cold water on it and said, the 2011 map is immaterial for what we are doing right now. It has no influence. It has no weight in this scenario. So if we want to make sure that the General Assembly knows that they are not being compared to 2011, they are being compared to 2018, when voters went to the ballot and explicitly said, we want fairness, we want communities and counties to be kept whole, and we do not want a repeat of 2011. So I just wanted to make sure we know that, and we use that because that was something that our opponents repeatedly tried to use, and the court explicitly said, no bueno, that's not a good argument. So we should call that out as well. Thank you.
Well, we have hit the point for lots of questions. And so just a second, I'm going to hand this off to Lisa for just a second because I'm going to cough.
Hi. Okay. Thanks, Catherine. So we'll get started with some of the questions. I know there's a lot here, so we can just jump in. So one of the first questions I'm seeing here is, what will happen if the deadlines are not met for this court appointed new deadlines? Does anyone? I don't know that answer, but I don't know if we know the answer at all yet.
Catherine, were you going to go ahead and?
Yeah, I guess I was just going to say, the court expects that their order will be followed. And they can sequester them. They can provide more guidance if necessary. Are there things you wanted to add, Colin?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say that, first off, and I know this is a frustrating answer, but this is a brand new process. We are, if we were in uncharted territory back in August, we are in even more uncharted territory now. However, in a hypothetical situation, you never really want to say for certain what will happen. However, the Ohio Supreme Court, through Article 3 powers, are granted a broad array and a broad brush to enforce their, I should say, enforce compliance in their orders, whether through mandamus actions of moving the filing deadline, possibly moving even the primary, if the Redistricting Commission does not meet their obligations. They could hold them in contempt. Again, these are all hypothetical scenarios. I'm not saying one's more likely than the other, but there are mechanisms in place for the Supreme Court to ensure compliance. The question is do the members of the Redistricting Commission want to force the Supreme Court to do that? because the more you get the Supreme Court involved in determining and outlining specific actions that have to be taken, the less discretion that the members of the commission have in their choices and in their output. So that's a political question, but also a legal one. And I guess the baseline answer is it's never easy to answer a hypothetical, but we will just have to see how that shakes out.
Thank you, Colin. I know that's the hardest part sometimes is not knowing. We had a second question of just clarifying how long these maps will be in effect for. So the question was, will they be 4-year or 10-year maps?
Well, this is also a little bit complicated. You remember that these were 4-year maps because a majority did not, it didn't include the Democratic members. So when we say 5 members voted for them, it is, obviously it's a majority, but they didn't have the sign off of the 2 Democrats, meaning these were 4-year maps. So it is conceivable they will be 4-year maps again. It's also conceivable that they'll get buy-in from both political parties or both members of both political parties on the commission. Colin, do you want to add some things?
Yeah, so after looking at the Supreme Court's order, at least for our state legislative districts, they cite Section 9B. The Supreme Court cited Section 9B of the Ohio Constitution as their mechanism for relief for drawing new General Assembly districts. In that section, it says that the Redistricting Commission shall be reconstituted in accordance of Section 1 of this article, which Section 1 includes the ability for there to be a 10-year map. It includes the ability for public hearings. It includes, the original requirements of the Redistricting Commission. So feasibly, I would say, plausibly, a 10-year map is still on the table. If a map is drawn that gains, 2 members of the minority party on the commission, then I believe that map would last for 10 years. It's a little bit more murky for the congressional maps. I'm not 100% certain as to whether or not a map would be a 4-year or a 10-year. I think if the General Assembly were to pass a map that had 1/3 of the minority caucus in support of that map, I think there's a possibility that could last for 10 years. However, again, I'm less certain about the congressional process than the state legislative process.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn to Michael Ahern's question, which he just posted in the chat. Is there any value to highlighting process issues, such as the website not being updated or people not able to submit testimony? Is that something that should be mentioned in testimony? That's his question.
So I do think, especially in your written testimony, that it is worth highlighting some of the challenges because it gets it into the public record and makes it clear that the public wasn't able to be included as in a way that was as functional as it could be. So I would encourage you to think about that for written testimony. I do think for the testimony that you're giving verbally, unless it's something that you are just gung-ho, really wanted to talk about, that's something I put on the back burner. How do you feel about that, Colin?
So here's my thought, and it may be, I might be in the minority in this opinion, but just know that the reason I say this is because I have seen during my time in the General Assembly, I have seen some of the more cantankerous members of legislative committees act poorly in committees, especially
Yes.
when they have been publicly scolded. And I guess what I mean by that is that the members of the redistricting commission know that they got a slap on the wrist. They know that they were proved wrong. This is an embarrassment for them. This is not what they want to do. So I feel as if you are to make process issues central to your testimony, that will allow them or give them an unneeded motivation to be less than pleasant during testimony. And I just want to make sure that people who are going before the redistricting commission do not open themselves up to pissed off legislators, if I can be frank. So if you feel strongly enough about it, obviously, if it's important to you, feel free to include it. I would just warn to be judicious in what you say.
It's so funny because, of course, I was encouraging us all to be polite, and they aren't always going to be polite to us, which is a real challenge. Lisa, did you have another question that we should answer?
Sure. Just let me scroll back here through. So then this is for the future, I guess, to think about that. This from Robert Thompson. What did we learn about the strength / clarity of the language in the Constitution from this judicial process? Do we think that the 2030 process will go better having gone through the courts? Again, another hypothetical.
Okay, so one of the things that was the most galling to me, and this has to do with any of the folks that were there on the ground in 2014 when they were negotiating and coming up with the language. First I sneeze, now my cat's sneezing in my face. Go away. There we go. Anyway, so one of the things that happened is, we had a whole conversation about the importance, not just of having a rule that says don't gerrymander or don't draw district line to favor or disfavor one political party, but then in fact, why don't we have criteria that makes it clear, like how do we specifically define that? And we came up with what we called a representational criteria. Dave's redistricting app calls it proportionality. But it looks at 10 years, look at the voting patterns of folks over a 10-year period. And that gives us a sense of how the district should go. So 54% should lean Republican, 46% should lean Democrat. It may not be exactly that, but it gave a framework for identifying when there was gerrymandering. And one of the things that as we look at this, Matt Huffman was one of the sponsors of this legislation. He did not somehow misunderstand that this meant that if, Governor DeWine got 80% of the vote, that there should be 80% of the votes that lean towards Republicans. He understood what representational fairness is, and certainly the Ohio Supreme Court understands what that is. But it does bring to mind the need, as we go through this process and we look at what other states are doing, to think about whether there are reforms that are necessary. And so right now we need to get through this map making. But they certainly did a lot of nonsense during the first round. Colin, anything you wanted to add about that?
Nope, that was good.
Okay,
More
so
questions?
yeah, just some logistics for tomorrow. There was a question, how much time are they giving for this hearing? I will say we don't know, because as of right now, there's not a way to submit testimony, so it would be difficult to the commission. Let me correct myself. So I assume this would not include testimony, but they may open it up. We're not sure. So you can email testimony right now we're recommending to Speaker Cup. That's correct, right, Catherine?
Yeah,
Or do we
so
discuss?
Speaker Cup and Senator Sykes, and that's something that Tiffany can throw their emails into the chat. I think one of the things that is irritating is, they make an announcement to the reporters on essentially on a Sunday. They don't put it in a public way. And so there are process things that are a problem here. And one of the biggest process things is, and I know Leanne is asking again, how will this affect Lorraine County? Well, because they have to completely redraw the maps. I highly encourage you to focus on submitting testimony that focuses on your community and not having it terribly divided. But we all are just kind of in this wait. We have to wait till tomorrow to really know exactly how they plan to go through the next week, and how they're going to engage in public comments, how they're engaging experts so that they do a better job. We will learn a lot tomorrow. Now, for all, many of us were thinking about driving in snow. This is available on the Ohio channel. So it's ohiochannel.org. So if you can't come in person, do not worry. It's ohiochannel.org.
Great. And we're putting the Redistricting Commission's legislative contact in the chat here. And we have a request from someone who's brand new to this process. Welcome. How they're asking if how someone new to this process could be the most effective, or what things can they do to introduce themselves to the commission or their legislators.
So we will send out a ways to take action. So I highlight, one of the first things to do is thinking about sending, an email to your state rep, your state senator about the congressional maps, and also to take action and send an email to the Ohio Redistricting Commission. In this case, it'll go to each of the members. For folks that are like, well, wait a second, Amelia Sykes isn't minority leader anymore. She is being replaced by Allison Russo. So Representative Russo, soon to be Minority Leader Russo. For folks that are worried about, okay, I do want to actually go to the State House tomorrow. Where is the room? Well, it's room 313. If you're parking, in the parking garage, when you go up and you're going through kind of the security area, they'll help you. But the best way to think about this is the next step. When you go through the first set of doors, you'll find the elevator. You take the elevator to the 3rd floor and you go in. Either door to your left will actually take you to the hearing room, because it's basically, it jogs around like an upside down U. Any other questions?
Just making sure I'm not missing any here.
I love Michael. It's a gerrymandered room.
I think so. Cynthia asked, the split in the maps, does this mean that every district can be 54-46, or is it the whole map needs to be 54%?
This is a way to look at, so 56% of those districts should lean towards Republicans, 46% should lean towards Democrats. Now, some of those districts, because they're not being manipulated for partisan advantage, are going to be competitive. But it's got a guideline. Because as you know, the way that we live, Democrats kind of live together and Republicans kind of live together. But the best way to think about this is, 56% of those districts, should lean towards Republican, 56% towards Republicans, 44% towards Democrats.
So if I were giving testimony and I live in Hilliard, I would say, it's important to me that Hilliard's placed with other similar communities. And I understand that it's a, majority typically Republican district, but it's also considered both Democrats and Republicans live here. So I would want my community to reflect that in the maps. So that would be a good example of how you can really relate it. Say like the current maps don't do that, and it puts us with, you know, really rural counties which don't represent Hilliard. So that's a good way to kind of think about how you might rate that.
And for those who are still kind of wondering about 10 days, the maps are due on the 24th at midnight. It is 5446. Sorry if I got it, if I somehow twisted it around. Thank you, Bruce. And then I noticed that there was another question that I missed. Lisa, did you notice?
I'm about halfway down again.
Okay.
I don't know which question.
Oh, so there was Dr. Regina Vincent Williams. When we do the Action Network, it automatically goes to all commissioners. And her question was, well, why was Amelia Sykes replaced? And Amelia Sykes was replaced because she stepped down as the minority leader. And in her position as acting minority leader, and I'm not remembering who it was, that Allison Russo ended up getting appointed. Allison Russo will further on become the new minority leader. Mia, did you want to add something? Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I think that might be it.
I do have a
So,
question.
oh yes, go ahead.
If I missed this, I apologize, but I was impressed with the congressional, maybe we don't need to go there, but the congressional map that the Dems prepared. It was fair, it followed the rules, and it really deserves to be considered. Is there any possibility of that, or something darn close to it?
So one of the things I think that is going to be interesting is seeing how they manage to talk about doing a bipartisan map. So, and we'll be watching and seeing how they make decisions. Will, you know, whether they start with the Republican map and think about changing it, whether they come up with something new, or whether the Democrats somehow get them to actually start with the Democratic map. I think it's more likely they'll start with something slightly different. But the things that you like about the Democratic maps are worth highlighting in your written or your testimony that you give at the State House.
Thank you.
If I can real quick, I'm seeing a couple questions about the candidate filing deadline. So I wanted to just take a second to answer that. So it's important to note that the candidate filing deadline for congressional candidates has been moved. That has already been moved to March, early March. So the General Assembly did give congressional candidates a little bit more time for gathering their petitions. For the General Assembly candidates, that filing deadline is still February 2nd. So if you just kind of game out the calendar here, the Redistricting Commission must adopt a new map by midnight on January 24th, midnight going into Tuesday. That then, following the adoption, gives candidates a 10-day window, barring the legislature could move the deadlines, the court could order the deadlines moved. We really don't know how it's going to shake out. But as current law is, candidates will have 10 days to collect 50 signatures from voters of their party in their district and file that with their Board of Elections. You know, the General Assembly, we've heard some speculative ideas from members of the General Assembly saying that they're looking at the filing deadline. They don't really want to move it. They may change the number of signatures required, dropping it down from 50 to what they deem to be a more reasonable number. But the key is that candidates will have to gather new signatures after the maps are finalized or potentially finalized on January 24th. Again, what happens after that still remains to be seen, but that's the lay of the land thus far.
Folks have wondered about, like, well, what if they still do, shall we say, highly gerrymandered or unfair Ohio House and Senate maps? What happens then?
Well, this was so first off, let me just say that there will be political considerations between the parties in this process. You know, there's a lot to consider between, you know, is there a 10-year, is there a bipartisan agreement on a map that is, you know, not the 54-46, but it's closer to say, you know, let's say it's 58-41, 58 Republican seats, 41 Democratic seats. You know, I think that's a reasonable assumption. And, you know, I would say that that's going to be subject to negotiation and compromise between the members. The minority parties may not, you know, go along with that. They could say, no, that's not what the court said, so we're going to not vote in support. It's going to be a simple partisan vote, and we're going to see you all back in court again. They could go the other way and say, well, we really need to get this done, and, you know, that's close enough to the ideal percentages. We'll go ahead and make that deal. Those are political calculations that are made by the partisan members of the commission. I would hope that that wouldn't happen. I would hope that we would, you know, strive to get as close to the prescribed percentages as possible. But, you know, politics is essentially the art of compromise. So we will have to wait and see. Now, the Supreme Court, you know, has retained judicial review. So if the Redistricting Commission comes back and adopts a map that's similar to what they already adopted, you know, there will be subsequent challenges. The Supreme Court will, you know, analyze the map to see if it has complied with all portions of Article 11. And if it hasn't, they will issue another order with whatever instructions they deem fit to include.
Great. Tommy, did you have a question? I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to ask about competitiveness within the districts. I understood that a percentage of range of 48 to 52% would still help have a district be competitive, and much more than that is going to still be skewed in a very partisan way. Is that a factor you think we need to include in our testimony so that it's going to be a fair playing field in all of the districts when we go in to do our elections and support candidates?
If I may, and Catherine, please feel free to jump into this after. Competitiveness is a tricky topic when we're talking about redistricting because, one, I think it's fair to say that we all strive to have competitive elections. I think those are important for democracy. It's important for candidates and important for a robust marketplace of ideas. The Ohio Constitution does not include the word competitiveness at all in either Article 11 or Article 19. And this was a factor that was actually explicitly mentioned in the Congressional Redistricting Lawsuit by the majority opinion, where they said that the respondents, the majority, the people that enacted the congressional map, they substituted competitiveness, a not enumerated requirement, for not unduly favoring or disfavoring a political party, which is an enumerated requirement. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of maximizing competitiveness. And I say that for another reason. When you look at Ohio's political geography, there are areas that there are not going to be competitive elections. So we don't want to give we don't want to give credence to the idea of creating competitive districts rather than creating fair districts, because it's a pretty short line to draw between point A to point B, where you'll look at districts that will be created to be competitive that would have otherwise been a district that is more reliable for one party or another. Now, these are competing interests, but at the same time, urging competitiveness is a convenient excuse to gerrymander districts that would otherwise not be, or that otherwise would be in a more safe electoral place, if that makes sense. If that makes sense, Tani.
Yes, that's very helpful, and I appreciate that distinction.
Well, one of the things that we also do know is when you don't manipulate district lines to to unfairly favor one political party or the other, you actually get a number of districts that are competitive. So it's not, oh, things are proportional, and that doesn't mean that there's competition there.
Mhm.
It turns out if you're actually if you're doing the thing where you're meeting the goals that are in the Ohio Constitution, you will also be creating some districts that are competitive.
Thank you. I guess there's a few in congressional terms, especially as well as state, there's some people I'd love to never have to look at again by making it competitive in those elections.
We're
So,
a nonpartisan group.
I know, so I'm going to keep that idea to myself, and I apologize.
Oh, too funny. All right. Well, I think we might be rounding the bend on questions.
Well, I actually
go for
see one last question, and Trevor brought it up. And it has to do with how does incumbency fall into this whole, scenario? And just for clarification, incumbency is, what do we do with the people already in office? Do they deserve special protection? Do their districts need to be drawn in a way to protect their incumbency, to make it easier for them to maintain that seat? And I will say, for both the state legislative and congressional districts, that answer is unequivocally no. Incumbency should not play a role in creating new General Assembly or congressional districts at all. Specifically, Professor Dick Gunther, who was one of the principal authors of the 2015 amendment to change our General Assembly district redistricting process, has testified before the commission that the authors chose to explicitly omit incumbent protection from the new ballot and constitutional language, because in Ohio, you have to have what's called the nesting rule, which means that you are required to have 3 Ohio House districts within a single Senate district. So when we look at incumbents, and we're talking about the state House right now, if you have to protect incumbents, and you have to protect all 99 incumbents, and then each Senate district has to house 3 House districts, that essentially locks in the previous decade's gerrymander, because you can't change the lines enough to make a difference, to create a new outcome. Whereas if you are closely monitoring incumbency, it's very easy to create just as gerrymandered districts as we currently have. And for the congressional case, this is something that the drafters and the drawers of what was the adopted congressional map cited, was that, all of the, maps put forth by the Fair Districts Coalition and by the Citizens Redistricting Commission and even the Senate Democrats, they said that their maps unduly disfavored Republican incumbents. And that is not true. First of all, because it's not, each incumbent is not guaranteed protection, but also you can't pair Democratic Republic or Democratic incumbents together because they're just too geographically spread apart. So any congressional district map that has really true new districts, new fair districts, and aren't just a regurgitated aspect or regurgitated reiteration of our current gerrymandered map, will have incumbents paired together. It's just a fact of reality. So Cliff Notes again, incumbency should have zero impact on the new General Assembly and congressional maps. Good question though, Trevor.
All right, I just wanted to highlight that there are still some postcards out there. If you're wanting to send some, please, just let us know that you're interested. If you go to the Fair District's website, there are good resources there. We'll also be sending you, probably tomorrow, we'll be sending you we'll be sending you a follow-up information, and we highly encourage you to check out our resource page. And then also, we need some resources to kind of keep going. So please consider, spending your time, and a little bit of money is also helpful. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And with that, I think we have come to the very end of our presentation. I just wanted to say a big thank you to absolutely everybody. I just encourage you all to take action, and thank you so much. Make sure that you send an email to the members of the Ohio Redistricting Commission and members, your state rep and your state senator about the congressional maps. And I just say, a big thank you to you all for participating today. And on that note, Colin, any final words as we all head out?
I just want to say thank you all so much for giving up an hour and 15 minutes of your time on a holiday, no less. I really do appreciate everybody's passion and dedication to fair maps, fair districts here. Stay tuned. I'm sure we will be sending out a lot of information to you all once we see what happens with the commission meeting tomorrow, and we begin to plan for these next 7 days now. But again, thank you to everybody for being here. We couldn't do this without you, so you all should be just so proud of yourselves for putting in all this work. So thank you.
I'm going to bid you all adieu, and hopefully I'll see some of you at the State House tomorrow. Thank you.